10:23 a.m. Arabian Sea, exactly 140 nautical miles south of the Iranian coastline. Inside the dimly lit Combat Information Center of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Higgins, the AN/SPY-1D radar suddenly screams a lethal warning. Two ghostly shapes are skimming the wavetops at Mach 0.77 from the dead silent southwest. They are heavily modified Soumar cruise missiles, packing massive 1,000-pound warheads, directly hunting a 100,000-ton American supercarrier and its 5,000 souls. In a blinding flash, a devastating shrapnel storm shreds the starboard side of the Higgins, ripping violently through the Mark 41 vertical launching systems and instantly silencing the phalanx CIWS. If the Iranian Fateh-class submarine commander thinks this cowardly ambush just crippled the United States Navy, then he is about to experience the most terrifying 22 minutes of his short life. Stay focused, because how this unfolds is a masterclass in turning a multi-million-dollar Iranian dream into a flaming underwater coffin. Deep beneath the surface, inside the cramped hull of the Iranian Fateh-class submarine, a premature celebration is in full swing. The sonar operator rips off his headset, grinning wildly, while the arrogant commander is literally high-fiving his crew, completely drunk on the illusion of victory. In their minds, they have just executed the perfect asymmetrical masterstroke. By slipping their $40 million diesel rust bucket through the thermal layers, they blindly believe they have successfully crippled the apex predator of the ocean. They are already picturing the glorious propaganda headlines in Tehran, imagining themselves as heroes who neutralized a multi-billion-dollar American carrier strike group with cheap Soviet knockoffs. Most ordinary people looking at the smoking deck of the Higgins might actually think the Iranians have the upper hand. But for the sharp military minds watching this, you already know the lethal difference between scoring a lucky sucker punch and surviving. While the Iranian crew pops imaginary champagne at 600 feet, thinking they are completely invisible, the reality above the surface is a terrifyingly different story. The smoke hasn't even cleared from the shattered decks of the USS Higgins before the American retaliatory machine kicks into brutal overdrive. The fatal flaw in the Iranian strategy is their complete misunderstanding of modern warfare. They thought they were fighting a single wounded destroyer, utterly failing to realize they just woke up an integrated multi-domain kill web. Inside the CIC, there is zero panic. Just the cold, calculated hum of the Aegis combat system processing thousands of threat variables in a millisecond. The strike group commander doesn't waste a single breath ordering a frantic anti-submarine hunt for a blind acoustic target. But here is the genius twist that makes this American counterstrike a masterpiece of tactical violence. The United States Navy isn't going to play a desperate game of hide-and-seek in the dark water. They are going straight for the puppet master pulling the strings. 10:32 a.m. The radar screens inside the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, flying at 30,000 feet, suddenly light up like a chaotic Christmas tree. The Fateh-class submarine wasn't acting alone. It was merely the bait for a massive, coordinated saturation strike. From the coastal launch pads near Bandar Abbas, a terrifying swarm of over 40 Shahed 136 kamikaze drones and antiquated anti-ship cruise missiles roar into the sky, while a heavily armed flotilla of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fast attack craft surges aggressively across the Strait of Hormuz. This is the ultimate asymmetric nightmare that the Iranians have been bragging about on their state television for decades. They are deliberately attempting to overwhelm the Aegis combat system by throwing sheer, cheap volume at a multi-billion-dollar carrier strike group. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the American strike group commander. If you were sitting in that darkened room watching dozens of inbound threats converging on your position, what would your next move be? Do you panic and empty your vertical launching systems? Here is the brutal economic reality of modern naval warfare that most armchair generals completely ignore. The United States Navy is armed with the most sophisticated interceptors on the planet, but every single time an Arleigh Burke destroyer fires a radar-guided SM-2 Block 3IA missile, it costs the American taxpayers roughly $2 million. Firing a barrage of these highly advanced hypersonic interceptors to swat down a flock of slow-moving, $20,000 fiberglass drones powered by cheap lawnmower engines is exactly the kind of catastrophic financial math that Tehran is praying for. It is a desperate war of attrition, deliberately designed to completely drain the American magazine capacity so that the real heavy hitters can slip through the defensive umbrella later. The Iranians are heavily banking on the assumption that the United States will flinch, overreact, and burn through hundreds of millions of dollars in a frantic, undisciplined attempt to protect the pristine hull of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. They want the American fleet defensively paralyzed, backed into a corner where every tactical victory feels like a massive financial defeat. They think they have forced the United States into an unwinnable corner where shooting down cheap garbage bankrupts the fleet. But this is exactly where the Iranian strategists made their fatal miscalculation, blindly assuming that the world's most lethal navy only brought one blunt, expensive instrument to a knife fight. Stay with me, because the final move isn't just a defensive shot across the bow. It is a terrifying demonstration of how American engineering solves a cheap math problem with uncompromising, cost-effective violence. 10:45 a.m. Inside the heavily fortified underground bunkers of the Bandar Abbas Naval Command, the atmosphere is absolutely electric with unearned arrogance. Iranian generals are crowded around outdated radar consoles, watching the green blips of their cheap drones swarm pushing closer to the American carrier strike group. They are literally laughing, slapping each other on the back, and posing for state media cameras like they have already conquered the entire Middle East. In their delusional minds, the temporary silence from the American destroyers is the ultimate proof of an impending collapse. They truly believe they have successfully paralyzed the world's most powerful military, outsmarting the Pentagon with a handful of modified speedboats and garage-built flying mopeds. The Supreme Commander of the Naval Forces is probably already drafting his victory speech, completely convinced that the United States is terrified of wasting its multi-million-dollar interceptors. They look at the radar and see an overwhelming, unstoppable wave of destruction closing in on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, blind to the fact that they are just sending sacrificial lambs to a high-tech slaughterhouse. This is the peak of Iranian hubris, a regime so addicted to its own propaganda that it cannot recognize when it has walked blindly into a meticulously designed kill zone. They think they have cornered a wounded animal, but what they have actually done is hand-deliver their exact coordinates to the most unforgiving targeting system on Earth. If you ask why the American fleet suddenly stopped firing its expensive missiles, I will tell you an unbelievable military secret that changes everything. The United States Navy wasn't hesitating, they weren't panicking, and they definitely were not running out of ammunition. They were simply letting the enemy mass their forces into one convenient, tightly packed target package to maximize the return on investment. The second act of this torch party was just getting started, and the Iranian command center is about to realize that their entire naval strategy is nothing more than a poorly constructed house of cards. But folks, here is the lethal error that the Iranian planners completely missed in their premature celebration. 10:47 a.m. The airspace directly above the Strait of Hormuz is about to become a very hostile graveyard. The Iranian commanders are drooling as their Shahed drone swarm crosses the 50-mile threshold, convinced that the American destroyers are out of options and too terrified to launch another $2 million interceptor. Ordinary viewers might look at this moment and think the United States Navy is helplessly waiting for a catastrophic impact, but the military experts watching this video will immediately recognize the terrifying beauty of an aerial ambush. The United States wasn't running out of missiles. They were just waiting for the trash to take itself out. High above the cloud cover, operating in complete electromagnetic silence, a vengeful squadron of Fa-18E Super Hornets had already slipped into the battle space, guided perfectly by the invisible data link of the E-2D Hawkeye. Here is the genius detail that makes this a masterclass in asymmetrical dominance. Instead of using multi-million-dollar weapons to swat down fiberglass toys, the Super Hornets are loaded with advanced precision kill weapon system pods, transforming standard 70mm rockets into laser-guided drone-shredding sniper rifles for $25,000 a pop. But wait, there is one more layer to this triple-threat failure for the Iranian regime. While the Super Hornets line up their cheap, highly lethal shots, The real apex predators of the electromagnetic spectrum, 2EA 18G Growlers, suddenly unleashed the devastating power of their ALQ-9 jamming pods. In a fraction of a second, they absolutely cooked the entire Iranian radio frequency spectrum, turning their prized SA-2 anti-aircraft batteries and coastal radars into useless, deaf blocks of scrap metal. The Iranian operators on the ground go from cheering to screaming in sheer panic as their screens dissolve into meaningless white noise, completely isolated and defenseless before they can even touch the triggers. If you think this electronic lobotomy is impressive, don't blink. Unless you want to miss the moment applied physics changes the history of Bandar Abbas forever. The table has been violently flipped, and the Iranian forces are about to learn the horrifying difference between playing war on a computer screen and facing the unrestrained wrath of the American military-industrial complex right now. 10:49 a.m. The unilateral slaughter begins with ruthless American efficiency. The F/A-18E Super Hornets do not even need to engage in complex dogfights. They simply point, paint the targets with airborne lasers, and unleash a merciless swarm of APKWS rockets. It is an absolute turkey shoot in the sky, a purely mechanical culling of inferior technology. The $25,000 rockets intercept the Shahed kamikaze drones with pinpoint mathematical precision, detonating the cheap warheads mid-air and turning the entire Iranian swarm into a pathetic shower of flaming fiberglass raining harmlessly into the dark ocean. The much-feared saturation attack, the tactical miracle that Tehran hyped up for years, is completely wiped out in less than 3 minutes without the USS Higgins needing to fire a single multi-million-dollar SM-2 interceptor. The financial masterstroke is breathtaking, proving that American pilots can solve a budget crisis with high explosive geometry. But if you think the United States is satisfied with just playing defense and saving money, stay tuned, because the physics of destruction in the next 30 seconds is about to change the map of the Iranian coastline forever. The Growlers have already permanently blinded the coastal SA-2 radar batteries, leaving the hostile airspace wide open for the real heavy hitters. 6 F/A-18F Super Hornets, acting as the ultimate flying executioners, aggressively roll in from the stratosphere and ripple-fire 24 massive GBU-31 JDAMs smart bombs, each packing 2,000 pounds of GPS-guided fury. Down in the Bandar Abbas command bunkers, the arrogant Iranian generals who were high-fiving just moments ago are now staring at their blank monitors in absolute paralyzing horror. The delayed fuse, bunker-busting warheads punch through 30 feet of reinforced concrete like hot steel needles through warm butter, detonating deep inside the subterranean facility with an earth-shattering, cataclysmic force. The $100 million Naval Command Center is instantly vaporized into a massive smoking crater, burying their delusional maritime propaganda under thousands of tons of pulverized rock. They have been utterly humiliated, effortlessly erased by a superpower that knows exactly how to weaponize its technological supremacy. 10:55 a.m. The suffocating dust settles over the obliterated ruins of the Bandar Abbas Naval Command, leaving nothing but a smoking crater of shattered Iranian pride. Hundreds of miles away in the pristine waters of the Arabian Sea, the mighty USS Theodore Roosevelt continues steaming forward, completely untouched, carrying its 5,000 souls in unbothered safety. The multi-billion-dollar American carrier strike group didn't just survive the ultimate asymmetrical nightmare. They completely humiliated the enemy without a scratch. The terrifying reality for Tehran is that the United States Navy's deep magazine is still packed to the brim with untouched, multi-million-dollar SM-2 and Tomahawk missiles. The invincible fleet didn't take the cheap bait. The high-tech F/A-18 Super Hornets are already banking gracefully back to the flight deck, coasting on victory with plenty of fuel to spare. The tactical masterclass is perfectly complete, neutralizing a massive saturation strike while keeping the defense budget intact and the warfighters completely out of harm's way. But folks, here is the lethal error. The ruins of Bandar Abbas are an absolute intelligence goldmine. While cooking the radars, the Growlers quietly sucked up every encrypted protocol, mapping the entire coastal defense network in real time. American commanders now have a permanent Tomahawk crosshair over every hidden silo. The submarine is just a death tube waiting to be hunted. This is strategic checkmate. So, tactical masterminds. What was the ultimate masterstroke? The cheap APKWS rockets or the electronic lobotomy? Comment below.